Hello everyone, welcome to the Miss Texas Show. In this show, we highlight the amazing lives of our survivors of traumatic events, human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, and we also bring on our community leaders to come on and share their resources. On this show, we have a segment called Military Time. In this segment, we invite our veterans as well as active members to be on the show to share their experiences during and after their services. We also have another segment called Beauty for Ashes. This is the segment where we invite our pageant sisters, our artists such as actors, dancers, musicians, last but not least, our survivors who are now ambassadors and sharing their amazing platforms and their amazing impact that they're doing in the community. If you would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us direct message through Facebook, MSUSA Texas. You may also email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. Now, without further ado, I am very honored today to have our former Richland County Council member, Mr. Jim Manning, on the show. Welcome, Mr. Manning.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be here with you.
Well, I heard so much about you, and I heard so much of what you do, and it demonstrates your really true passion that you're on board here. Because now you are not no longer a council member, but you're doing so much social work because of your passion. And as you know, like people like us, we can just like cannot stop talking about this. So I'm gonna read a little bit of Mr. Mannon, and he's doing so much for the community, and he has been doing so much. And we're gonna bring the highlight and let him tell his story to you directly. Mr. Mannon lives in the city of Forest Acres, a town just over 10,000 residents located in the Midlands area of South Carolina. He and his wife Sandra Mannon, PhD, has two adult sons, Jim, who lives with his wife Amanda in New York City, and Luke, who resides in Colombia. Wow, your family is quite diverse everywhere. And Jim retired after his first career as a social worker and administrator in South Carolina state government. He then worked with the nonprofit organization Palmetto AIDS Life Support Services for more than 10 years. Now, in his third career, he is an enterprise who created a eclectic consulting business, Gray Hair Solutions LLC, where he offers conundrum alleviation. Jim has been an adjunct college professor for nearly 3 decades. Wow. And he was elected for 3 terms for the Richland County Council, from which he stepped aside in 2020. Jim has also does his historic preservation through adaptive reuse and Main Street work, along with statewide advocacy for anti-human trafficking. So without further ado, we're gonna let Mr. Manning tell us about the story. How did you get started? How did you get involved with this work?
Well, thank you so very much. And I have had just a very wonderful life with a lot of eclectic experiences to meet a lot of people and come in touch with many folks that I would not have otherwise. Would like to particularly begin the focus with anti-human trafficking efforts. I know one of your former guests was Vicki Jackson, and she kind of got her start here in Richland County. I was very fortunate that I had a local high school that did a program about human trafficking, and they invited all the local elected officials. And when I went, one of the people that was there was the executive director Carla Dameron of the South Carolina chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. And when I was hearing the tragic stories, I just thought, what can I do as an elected official to the Richland County Council to make a difference in our community? So we held a breakfast for me to just do a bit of a listening session. I was thinking we might have 3 or 4 people at the table to tell me about it. We ended up with 18 people that came to that initial listening session. As a result, I shared some of the needs and concerns with my colleagues on Richland County Council and told them about the needs, created the Richland County Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force, and council saw the need and went ahead and provided the funding for a half-time, part-time coordinator for the task force. We wanted for Richland County in South Carolina to be the leading county to fight human trafficking. And thus they provided the money. And Vicki Jackson was one of our first part-time coordinators before she went out to the West Coast and was doing a lot of the work that you highlighted there on your show earlier. So we're really proud of her. And later, as the needs grew and the task force became larger and larger, our Richland County Council saw the need to fund that position full time. And so for the last 3 years, that has been a fully funded full-time position here in Richland County to head up the task force, as well as to work with our court-appointed special advocates, the volunteer guardian program here in Richland County, which you would just not even believe the numbers of young people, children that come into care who have been involved with anti-trafficking. So that's how working with other people, our county has been recognized at the state level and at the national level for the work. Again, I don't take credit. I just happen to be the one to hear it first, bring it to my colleagues on council. Everybody in the community rallied around it. Professionals got together. We went from part-time to full-time. Many other agencies in our county, they had staff folks that were doing a little bit of work in this area, and it went up to more full-time in their agency. So there's a whole lot of people doing it, and it really was a time for me to step aside because we had just grown so much, and there were so many people that were doing the work far smarter, much more effective than what I would be able to do it. And it's so exciting to see the folks doing that.
Wow, you're so humble, Mr. Manning. You're the pioneer who started this initiative, and you have the vision. You had the vision, to see what is ahead of us and what is going on in your community. And regarding Vicki Jackson and her interviews, we're going to put on the content section with the links. So you'll be able to see part one of her interview and part two of her Q&A. She's such a passionate advocate, just like Mr. Manning. And this is awesome. I always believe that this is a community cause. This is a
Mhm.
global cause. No one, regardless of how powerful we are, we each have our strengths, but only when we work on this together, we can end this. So
Yeah.
you're so humble, and kudos to you for starting this initiative, Mr. Mannon. I would like to ask, when you mentioned that the court-appointed volunteer court advocates and the number of cases and the children, can you tell us a little bit of, our audience, whether they know the situation or not, about roughly, what is going on and the demographics of the situation in Richland County?
In Richland County, so we always have to remember that there are two types of trafficking of human beings. There's the sex trafficking and there's the labor trafficking. So we don't ever want to forget about that. Another thing that we always have to be very careful of here in Richland County is, for whatever reason, most all the cases that we come across are young girls. But we do have to remember that it affects boys. There are other places in the country, in their county, where it may affect boys more than girls. But when you're asking specifically about our county, Richland County, which is Richland County includes the state capital of Columbia, South Carolina. That's in Richland County. If you're wondering where Richland County is, we are smack dab in the middle of South Carolina. Whether you're coming in from the mountains or the ocean, we're right in the middle of the state. And so the court-appointed special advocates, the volunteer guardian ad litem, what they do is that, and this actually came from a judge out of Seattle many years ago, just realized that whenever you had a court case, you had the parents represented, you had the state represented by legal representation, and there was really nobody there for the child's interest. And so that was when the court-appointed special advocate program took foot nationally, and Richland County under Paige Green just about every year would receive some kind of recognition for innovative work. And she was one of the people that stepped in very early and said that their program wanted to be a part of the growth. And so that's why the position is actually located in that part of the county government.
Wow. You mentioned something very important. I wanted to tell our audience that anyone, regardless of your age, gender, race, nationality, social and economic status, can be a victim of trafficking. And there are two forms of trafficking: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And you also mentioned something very interesting. We work in this field, and with the situation, with the similarities of how a pimp grooms the victim to how an abuser abused, the victim in a situation of domestic abuse. And therefore, we advocate for the three areas: domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, because the people who are victims of sexual assault, domestic violence are more vulnerable to this. And but you also mentioned that it's very interesting that we have in the work talked about certain demographics, certain groups, or there are, I guess, holes and things that can be improved in certain systems. But this is the first time I actually hear about the child's interest not being represented, and this is great. That again, your county is the pioneer for this. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, and we are not the pioneer for the court-appointed special advocates. We were the pioneer for having a position that directly related with a specialty in anti-human trafficking and specializing in services to victims who have been trafficked. So it was sort of a subset specialty that our county pioneered in terms of that. We didn't pioneer the program about the what we call costs of the court-appointed special advocates. They're in counties all across the country. I think every county has some form of this at this point. Um, and other areas are doing innovative things as well with specialty. And one of the wonderful things about the national CASA program is all the efforts they do to share amongst each other and encourage county programs across the country to share with each other their ideas, their innovative programs, and so that just the best interest of the children is served as much as possible across the country.
So, from your experience and observation, since that you have court-appointed advocates to represent the best interest of the children, have you seen any differences on the outcome of the court cases?
Oh, absolutely. That program is just phenomenal in terms of having a judge hear from somebody who is there to talk about the child's number one and important best interest. And so the result for the child and their quality of life, whether they stay in care a little extra longer or whether they get to go back home sooner, because there is somebody that's going in, doing home visits, meeting on behalf of the child, those stakeholders in their life in order to make sure
I think we're having a
and
little
as a matter of fact, it might be something that, you'd be interested in getting somebody who works for one of the court appointed special advocates program. I think that would make a sensational show in and of itself.
That would be lovely. We would like to bring on, someone who works in the system to introduce a little bit more to the community about what they do, and so that the community can volunteer and can be involved and do their share. And whether you have the money to donate, where you don't have the money to donate, but you have time, or maybe you don't have either, but you share that, anything that you do can help us and help us prevent this from happening so that no one can have to suffer from this again. And we want to save,
Mm.
one victim at a time. So yeah, this is awesome that you're introducing of those knowledge to our audience. And tell us a little bit more, like in different of our interviews, we have interviewed people from across the country, and people have mentioned certain states have certain laws and certain maybe certain cities have certain regulations. Regardless of that, as a former councilman, I think it's very important that you took the initiative once again, and kudos to you for recognizing the importance of that. And can you share with our listeners who may be trying to be elected or who are already elected officials, what are your advice? What are your suggestions to them? What can they do to help improve the qualities of their communities, of their lives, as well as help preventing this from happening in their communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's very important whether you're running for office or if you're already in office. First of all, and I know all your guests will always talk about this, you have to admit or you need to learn that it is happening in your community. And you may be listening to this and say, no, it's not in our community. Well, it is in your community. And if you talk to somebody in law enforcement, or if you talk with somebody who works with domestic violence, or if you talk to somebody that works in child protective services in your community, those are people that can let you know about the fact that it is happening in your community. You can also, the Polaris Project is a national project. You can Google Polaris, or if you Google national statistics on human trafficking, it'll pop up, and you can go through there and they'll show you about where they've had phone calls from wherever you live with people calling the hotline. And I know that you talked about that with Vicki Jackson when she was on before about the hotline number. And so they've had calls in from your community, I guarantee you. So those are the kind of places to look. And then once you realize that that's something that is a part of your community that needs to be addressed, then I think you'll look at how you'll either make that a part of your campaign or how you want to start talking with your other elected colleagues about what you may need to do to the community.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I think this is truly important, for anyone who, like you said, who is getting to be reelected or who is already in office, to learn the experience, to learn the success stories from you. And you mentioned the National Human Trafficking Hotline. It is 1-888-3737-888. And we're gonna
You
link this
go.
number.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, thank you for sharing the resources. I think it's very important for, I'm actually, my background is, part of my background is I'm a petroleum engineers. So for certain
Hmm.
people, we're more visual. We need to see the numbers. Okay, we hear the story. It doesn't really ring the bell, but you see the numbers. So for those that who don't know, human trafficking is a business. It is a $150 billion business. If that doesn't ring the bell, I don't know what to say. But for the stats that you can look up the Polaris project, you can also go to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. They also have by different regions and the call-in numbers and everything that will give you a little bit idea as well. This is wonderful that you're sharing, your experience with us about what you have done so that other people can learn from you and learn from the success stories. And I know that you have recently. Uh, I know in your bio you say you stepped away from the elected position in 2020. How long ago was that? Was that beginning of 2020 or end of 2020?
Yes, so I total years. Interestingly enough, led to the local school board from 1992 until 2004. So she was elected by people in our area to serve on the school board for 12 years. And then in 2008, I ran the seat. So I served 12 years. People, I didn't want to serve longer than she did. That just wouldn't seem right. And and one of the things that I did want to talk about a little bit is some of the work that I've transitioned into is called Community Heart and Soul. And that works with small rural communities, smaller towns and cities. And it's a program, it's called Community Heart and Soul. And I think it's a very important extension of this work. It's not directly related, but this is a process and a methodology where a community comes together and they look at how they can involve everyone, focus on what matters most, and play the long game. And so they go through gathering stories from people from all areas, all demographics, all groupings within their community for them to understand what the needs are, to bridge some of the gaps where there aren't communication, bring very diverse groups to the table to talk to each other. They take the table to the people to hear about what their concerns and interests and aspirations for their community is. So it may not be directly related, but as I talked earlier, sometimes there's things going on in our community like human trafficking. And we just don't know about it because it's not in our life in the community. But when we bring people together, as this Community Heart and Soul program does, it's an opportunity for people to learn and share and grow. And one of the elements of that growth may be realizing that this is an issue in their community that needs to be addressed.
Yes, I totally agree. I think everything has its association one with another. Just take COVID, for instance. Is COVID related directly to human trafficking? No, not at all. But because of COVID, people were quarantined, and the people are kind of, on top of each other's nerves, and the rates of domestic violence went up. And for the same reason, human trafficking, the sex trafficking rate went up because people are bored at home. Guess what they do? Pornhub began to provide free
Yeah.
membership to people, and therefore people, they just like literally have nothing to do. Well, I got, this free thing, and they thought, regardless of the reason they got on, but it's addictive, and they got addicted. And then guess who is the victim? Let's not even talk about incest. I have another, not one but several interviews about incest. The one that was aired was Darlene Clark, and there was another one that is going to be, interviewed. So they have no access to people. Guess who is going to be the victim? Well, whoever they can find. And on the other hand, poverty, just like you mentioned about the rural area, possibly there could be
Yeah.
poverty. And people need a way to, a mean to survive. And in this case, that's the vulnerability. And pimps, believe it or not, they look for those vulnerability. Whether you have relationship problems with your family, whether you have money problem, they groom you. They make you think that they care about you. They make you think that they love you. They make you think that they are the love of your life, and they provide for you. And the next thing after that, they're gonna, transition you into the sex trafficking industry. So I really think what you're doing is great, and I truly believe that, that is part of the prevention area, of preventing this from happening. That is great. And I was, actually going to ask you, because I read on
That's
your
fine.
bio about, you were talking about statewide advocacy for human trafficking, anti-human trafficking initiatives. So, is this what you were referring to?
Sort of. I mean, that's not what the community heart and soul is about. That's just an interest that I have. But the statewide advocacy, working with the General Assembly, one of the things that we identified in our area was the fact that the regulation, the business licensing regulation of hotels and motels, cities, municipalities, the state law allows for them to be able to go in and do some regulation of the hotels and motels. County government is not able to do that per state law. And so I'm in the process of working with the lobbyists from the county association and with y'all gonna see my wife walk past. This is the new Zoom world that we live in.
Hi, Mrs. Mannon. How are you?
Well, I will share with you, I know this is kind of weird, but this is the Zoom world that we live in. But
Yes.
Mrs. Manning is also Dr. Manning, school psychologist, and she was recognized last week as with the President's Award from the National Association of School Psychology for her service to children in the field of school psychology. So I'm real proud of her. Thanks for letting me, because of the Zoom world, have that. But I did want to say one thing that
Congratulations, Dr. Mannon. I wanted to,
it says,
address my
Miss Texas
congratulations
says
to you.
congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
She says
I
thank
know
you.
some great school psychologists in Texas too.
She says there's some great school psychologists in Texas.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
awesome. That is awesome. You're such a power couple.
She's special. But I did want to go back and just, we need to remember that people who traffic human beings, particularly children, we think of pimps and like we see on TV, pimps, but you know, a boyfriend of a mama might be selling two of the children for sex. Or you talked about incest. If somebody in the family is having sex with one of their relatives, well, they more than likely be willing to sell some of that sex to people they know. So we don't ever want to be thinking that pimps are just people who drive around in fancy cars like drug dealers. They're just dealing with people for sex. It also can, it can be a landlord who is making you have sex with some people to keep from getting evicted because you've lost your job in COVID and not able to pay your rent. And so you may be being coerced to provide sexual favors. Well, you're being trafficked in that situation.
Thank you for your clarification. I wanted to clarify that with the audience too. Like myself, and I mentioned in many situations that a lot of people kind of confused between human trafficking and smuggling. A long time ago, I always try to differentiate with people. I said, people sometimes misunderstood human trafficking as a whole container of
Yes.
foreigners, people look like
Yes.
not not from here, and those are not human trafficking. Those are smuggling. So the
Yeah.
definition of human trafficking is a person that is coerced to provide a service, whether that is sex service or labor service. So thank
Yes.
you for mentioning that and clarifying that with our audience. I think that's very important. And you also mentioned something very important, Mr. Mannon, about who are the pimps. Because long time ago we used to think pimps are those people we saw on TV with like tattoos all over the arm,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just looks like masculine and very scary. But they can look like just a normal person, and they can even be your loved ones. So you really
Yeah.
need to educate yourself. And this is why one of the many reasons we wanted to provide this platform to educate you, because education is powerful. When you're
Yes.
educated, you'll have your eyes open. You will be alert to what is happening to you. Or if your neighbor is having something suspicious, you can call the hotline. And of course, if it's an emergency, then you're going to call your local law enforcement or 911.
Yes.
So this is awesome that you're mentioning this to you, because we're not going to always see pimps that looks like what we used to think they are, and they're just going to be
Right.
normal people. We just have to keep our eyes open to protect our
Yeah.
loved ones and protect our community. And before we had the COVID Zoom situation, talking about that, I'm loving it. I wouldn't have had the honor to meet you, Mr. Mannon, without the COVID, without the Zoom situation. And I'm saving, hours of time from driving on the road to meetings, and now just meeting on Zoom. So
Yeah.
it's very unfortunate that we have the COVID, but for people like us who are positive, we always find, good things out of it. And when you were mentioning,
Yes.
before that, you were mentioning about the General Assembly and about the state is allowed to make certain rules and regulations, and the counties are not. And you were talking about hotel and motel. I think that's a very hot topic. We actually
Mhm.
have one of, Vicky, you mentioned part two of her Q&A is regarding that exactly, because people are so interested in this topic. And someone else, they had a nonprofit organization called Host Texas.
Mhm.
Miss Dawn McCracken is talking about that. But we would like to hear your view, because you're so experienced, and also your perspective of from as a former elected official, what you think that should be done, and how people are listening here can help you achieve that goal.
Well, I think what's so important is that we have to have relationships with our elected officials. And I tell people all the time, whatever you're an advocate for, in this case, we're talking about advocacy for funding for programs for domestic violence, for anti-human trafficking, when it is election season. And I particularly want to remind everybody that most elections are determined in the primary. Almost all the seats in this country are either a Democrat seat or a Republican seat. So keep that in mind, that usually whatever candidate wins in the primary ends up winning in the fall. Now, the presidency is a little different across the whole country, but generally, and especially the more local you get. So when it is election time and when the candidates are out at a community meeting, that's the time to go and get acquainted with them and ask them, what is your position on support for services for victims of domestic violence, of child abuse, of sex trafficking, and have them tell you that while they are running, so that A, it helps you make a decision about who you want to vote for, and B, because if you get them to say that in a public meeting while they're running, when they get elected, it gives you an opportunity then to go back and not start advocating for your issue after they're elected, but reminding them that when they were at the fire hall, or when they were at the church social center, or when they were at the community park, you asked them about this topic, and they said that if they got reelected or if they got elected, that they would certainly, make that a focus or look into what needed done with that. So start when they are running, because once a person gets elected, everybody wanted to be my best friend once I got elected. Before I got elected, there were a handful of people that knew me and connected with me and talked with me at community meetings on the campaign trail. And it was much easier to get acquainted with a person. And it's just like everything else. I used to laugh to people and I'd be in a workshop somewhere and they'd be talking about how to advocate for your cause. And they'd spend time putting a PowerPoint up about how to address your letter, and that it should be addressed to the Honorable Jim Manning, Richland County Councilman, District 8. And what I told people, if you have a relationship with me, you can write it on a napkin, right? Because, it's kind of like your doctor. If your doctor is your friend and you have a relationship with them, well, you can call them up at home on a Sunday afternoon and tell them, you've got your usual pollen congestion and you've got a sinus infection, and they call a prescription in. That's what happens when you have a relationship. When you just go to your doctor when something's wrong with you, then you can call their office and you get the answering service, and the answering service will refer you to a doc in the box, and you go through all that, and eventually you get your prescription called in. It's relationships. It's with everything. And so you just establish a relationship. We used to tell people when we go shopping back in the day before all the COVID, because my wife didn't let me have the buggy because we get all kind of stuff in there we didn't really need. And so she keep me away from the buggy, but I go to the grocery store with her and I just wander around. People come up, talk to me. There was actually one person, it never seemed like on Sunday we had gotten everything in the week we needed. So on the way home from church, we'd stop at the grocery store. Well, there was one person that kind of lobbied the county council on a number of things. He knew that I would be, he knew what time church got out, and he knew that there was probably a 95% chance that Jim Manning would be at the grocery store. And there he'd be, and maybe 1 out of 4 times he'd have something to talk with me about, business wise, otherwise. And people say, oh, I hope I'm not bothering you. I said, if I want to be your elected official and I think you're bothering me, you need to vote for somebody else. I mean, if you're elected official, if you're a bother to them, then you should not bother to vote for them. And you should bother to see that somebody else gets elected that is interested in what the people want to know and hear.
Wow, what a role model. I know I don't live in Richland County. I know you're no longer running, but this is what I want to hear. I want my representative to care about what we want, to be there. I know it's inconvenient. It's Sunday afternoon. It's after church service. You're doing grocery. It has nothing to do with work. But this is what a true elected official does. And that's what you did, Mr. Mannon. I'm just like so pleased and so honored to get this opportunity to get to learn more about what you do and your passion about anti-human trafficking. So what advice would you give to our audience just in general about what they can do for from prevention of human trafficking to for their family or for the people that they might know or just neighbors?
Yes. So in general, you just have to be aware. You need to look around. You need to pay attention. And when the community action law enforcement officers, when they come to community meetings and they would do the crime watch zones and all, they would always talk about be a nosy neighbor. And that's true. Look around, pay attention. If there's a car in the driveway next door that doesn't look like it should be there, take a look. And, if you realize somebody's coming out of the house carrying a bag of stuff and they don't belong there, so, when you're looking and you realize something's not right with this picture. And so just be aware. Now, most specifically, every time I did workshops, what I would tell people, the number one thing with teenagers that should make you very, very, very curious is when they have more than one telephone. And see, we don't think like that because most of us have our personal phone and our work phone. So we're kind of used to carrying 2 phones, and we're kind of used to people carrying 2 phones. But why would any normal teenager have 2 telephones? Right? You have the phone your parents got you, and your friends call you on it, and you might not like the restrictions your parents put on it, but most teenagers have 1 phone. But if they have somebody who is coercing them, who is using them, abusing them in some way, then they are carrying that telephone to have them connected with the people that are abusing them in some way. So I was always a big believer of be asking the question, why does that teenager have 2 phones and your teenager doesn't, and all your teenagers' friends don't, but then all of a sudden, one young lady, one young man's coming and they've got 2 phones. There's some reason. Now, there may be some legitimate reason. There's always an outlier. But usually, the reason is not a healthy reason for that child. That's Jim Manning's one little thing to make your antennas go up and be asking, why is that? That is not normal. That is not routine.
I love that. I love that, be a nosy neighbor. That's exactly true. When there's some kind of lifestyle change, some behavior change, I think it's very important to be alert of what is going on, especially nowadays with the freedom of access into the internet and so many things, apps that I'm still learning. Apparently, there are apps that you can hide other apps on your phone, and so many different apps. And I also know that in some of my interviews I know about the Twitch. And apparently Twitch is a platform. To begin with, it was a platform that kids just go on to play video games, but that naturally, conveniently became a platform for the pimps to go lure their victims. So, I think Mr. Manning is so right. Just be alert of what is happening that is different from their normal behavior, so that you can be more alert, and it doesn't hurt. Maybe just like Mr. Menon said, maybe it is a legit reason, but if it's not, you rather be more careful. And that is so true. That is so true. Wow, you have been so influential and so knowledgeable from both the elected officials' perspective as well as the social workers' perspective. But what I'm most impressed is that your passion. And because of your passion, that's why you have gone so far, and you're still doing that even after that you have served your elected official services. So, is there any takeaway or anything else you would like to tell our audience?
Just to stay involved, one of my things that I like to say now is one of the great disservices that we've done over the last couple decades was particularly amongst families. We would say that there are two topics we should not discuss: politics and religion. And we did ourselves such a disservice in that. What we should have taught was how we talk about those two topics with civility. We should have been saying, these are two topics we all need to be talking about, but we need to be civil, we need to be polite, we need to have a big heart. And remember, if you take off the H and you take off the E of the word heart, you have ear. Your ear, EAR, are the three letters in the middle of the word heart. And we all need to have a big heart. And when you say, Jim, how do you have a big heart? Take the three letters in the middle, use your ears, and listen to people kindly to hear what is on their mind and what is on their heart.
Wow, I'm speechless. Just like I said, if I live in Richland County and if you're still, running, I would definitely vote for you. And this is, the type of officials that I want to serve for us. And like you mentioned, your goal is not for your self gain, but your goal is to be elected so that you can serve the community. Thank you so much for your service, Mr. Manning. Again, I cannot say enough thank you.
Well, I can't thank you enough. It's more of an honor for me to be on the Miss Texas show than what little things I do in the world. I watched and have looked at so many of the segments that you've done, and you're bringing such wonderful, valuable information to people across the country and across the world. And I just really applaud you for that. It's wonderful work, and I know it takes time and effort. And So thank you for what you do, because you are really making a very wide and broad impact on our world for good. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. That means a lot to me, coming from someone like yourself, who really has the heart for it, who has worked on that. And to me, that, I know I'm not a politician. I might not have experience in law enforcement, but I believe that, if I put my heart to something, I can achieve anything that, and we all can do that. So I just,
Yes,
call all
yes.
of you to join us in this force, like I said in
Yep.
the beginning, that we all have our own strength. In my case, I believe that, anyone can be a pageant. Anyone can be beautiful. There are a lot of beautiful girls out there. But for those young girls who are listening, I wanted to let you know that the outside, the appearance, the beauty, it can go away when the time passes. But I wanted to influence you to bring an impact to the community, to bring the inner beauty. And that is my goal. And my goal for running for the beauty pageant is not for because of the title. Yes, do I like looking beautiful? I cannot deny that. But I think I really more importantly focused on the platform that I am able to provide today. And thank you for people like yourself, Mr. Mannon, so many wonderful advocates. And then, you have done your homework, and like we have so many advocates who were victims. And today they are survivors. And this is what gives me the power. And I'm talking about this, and I have like goosebumps on my skin.
Hmm.
I feel
Hmm.
like, every time when I'm able to help a person, and I'm able to validate that through our survivors. I asked our survivor, for instance, Darlene Clark, and she said, I was asking her, how do you share with people who are still going through that? What gives you strength? She said, when people come to me say, this happened to me too, and they spoke up finally, because healing is a journey. You're never gonna, the physical wounds will go away, but the emotional wounds will never go away.
Hmm.
And people might think it will. No, it doesn't. It's a matter of how we cope with it, and how many people will be there for them to support them. And please join me on this platform. This is a safe platform that we can provide support to each other. And today, we can support each other online. You can comment on this video, you can like this video, you can share this video. We also have a support group now called Survivors Against Violence Everywhere, that is on Facebook. It's a platform that anyone can join, whether you are a victim, survivor, maybe you're their supporters. Supporters, as you know, Mr. Mannon, that they sometimes can get stressful as well, because the survivors can have a trigger out of nowhere, and it can be stressful, but it's your platform too. You can go on and share your experiences and get the advice. And remember that the purpose of this show is hope, love, and unity. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and we want to help you with this healing journey with love, and we can do this together. Thank you again so much. I cannot say enough, Mr.
Thank
Mannon,
you.
and we would love to know more about you. How can our audience find you? Do you have, for your social work that you do for the community Heart and Soul and the other
Yes.
initiatives?
Probably the easiest way is if you Google Community Heart and Soul, and I'm listed on their website under coaches, and there's a way to connect with me there. Plus, it gives you my bio and some information about me.
Excellent. We're gonna link this link under the content section below, so that you can get to know more about Mr. Menon and the wonderful work that he has been doing. And keep up with the great work. If there's anything I can do, please let me know, Mr. Menon. And
Well,
thank you
thank you.
again
And
for
that's
being on the
certainly a
show.
two-way street. And what an honor and privilege to be with you today.
Thank you so much. And we'll
Thank
see
you
you
so
next
much.
time. This is the Miss Text Show, and please hope, like, and subscribe because sharing is caring, and we would like you to share so that more people can benefit from this and we can prevent this from happening.